Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 63 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto. And today we are starting chapter 23 of the third canto. There are 33 chapters in the third canto, so we are more than 2/3 of the way there, about 2/3. Okay, so this chapter 23 is titled Devahuti's Lamentation. Let us begin by reciting our prayers. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Dejatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarupyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All right then. So, chapter 23. There are 57 verses, so it's another fairly long chapter. And we've divided those 57 verses into 6 sections as follows. So number 1, verse 1 to verse 5, Devahuti serves Kardama Muni. Verse 1 to verse 5, Devahuti serves Kardama Muni. Second section, verse 6 to verse 8, Kardama appreciates Devahuti's service. Verse 6 to verse 8, Kardama appreciates Devahuti's service. Then the third section, verse 9 to verse 11, Devahuti asks for a child. Verse 9 to verse 11, Devahuti asks for a child. That's section 3. Then the fourth section, and it's a really long one, verse 12 to verse 42. That's a long section. Kardama produces an aerial mansion. Verse 12 to verse 42. Kardama produces an aerial mansion. That's the fourth section. The fifth section, verse 43 to verse 48, Devahuti and Kardama enjoy together. Then the sixth section, verse 49 to verse 57, it's the end of the chapter, Devahuti feels cheated and laments. Section 6, verse 49 to verse 57, Devahuti feels cheated and laments. All right, so first section then, verse 1 to verse 5, Devahuti serves Kardama Muni. And, of course, I've been through the chapter, and it's only 5 verses, but the purports, or some of the purports, are quite substantial. So I'm going to read through the verses first of all. So verse 1, Maitreya continued, after the departure of her parents, the chaste woman Devahuti, who could understand the desires of her husband, served him constantly with great love, as Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva, serves her husband. Verse 2. Over Dura, Devahuti served her husband with intimacy and great respect, with control of the senses, with love, and with sweet words. Verse 3. Working sanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity. Verses 4 and 5. The daughter of Manu, who was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as greater even than Providence. Thus she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. Okay, let's go through with the purports. Verse 1. Well, the section is Devahuti serves Kardama Muni. Verse 1. Maitreya continued. After the departure of her parents, the chaste woman Devahuti, who could understand the desires of her husband, served him constantly with great love, as Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva, serves her husband. So Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by getting into the subject of Bhavani serving Lord Shiva. He says this example of Bhavani is very significant, and she, of course, Bhavani means the wife of Bhava, of Lord Shiva, and she is the daughter of the king of the Himalayas, but she married Lord Shiva, who's like a beggar. Lord Shiva doesn't even have a house, let alone a palace, and she was the daughter of a king. But still, she served him very nicely. She served her husband very nicely. Lord Shiva was sitting under the trees, passing his time in meditation, but Bhavani would serve him just like a poor woman. And similarly, Devahuti is the daughter of an empress, Vaibhava Manu, but she preferred to accept Kardama Muni as her husband and served him with great love and affection, knowing how to please him. Therefore, she's described here, and this is just very significant, she's designated here as Sadhvi, which means a chaste, faithful wife. So ideally, at least, Prabhupada says, her rare example is the ideal of Vedic civilization. And ladies, listen to this. Every woman is expected to be as good and chaste as Devahuti or Bhavani. Talk about role models, Krishna. And Prabhupada goes on to say that today in Hindu society, unmarried girls they're still taught to worship Lord Shiva with the idea that they can get husbands like him. And for that matter, the young men are advised to worship Uma or Bhavani, Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva, to get good wives, and so they can become as good husbands as Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva, though, Lord Shiva is the ideal Vaishnav. He's the ideal husband, not in the sense of riches, the ability to give sense gratification and material facilities, but because he's the greatest of all devotees, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, and therefore he can really help his wife in the main, most important way to help her become a really good devotee. Right, so Lord Shiva constantly meditates on Lord Ram, actually. And he constantly chants Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. We understand actually that since the time of Lord Chaitanya, he's been more chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But traditionally, he chants the name of Lord Ram. Lord Shiva does. So girls are taught to worship Lord Shiva so they can get a husband who is as good a devotee as him. Yeah, they don't worship him to get a rich man who's going to give them all sorts of opulent clothes and jewels and all that. But if a girl gets a husband who is as good a devotee as Lord Shiva, then her life becomes perfect. Because Prabhupada says the wife is dependent on the husband. So if the husband's a devotee, she shares his devotional service because of serving him. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this reciprocation of service and love between husband and wife is the ideal of a householder's life. So on to verse 2. O Vidura, Devahuti served her husband with intimacy and great respect, with control of the senses, with love, and with sweet words. So Srila Prabhupada says that two words are very significant, Vishrambena and Gauravena. She served her husband in these two ways, Vishrambena and Gauravena. So these are two important processes in serving the husband or serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishrambena means with intimacy, Gauravena means with great reverence. The husband is a very intimate friend. Therefore, the wife must serve like an intimate friend, but understand that the husband is superior and must be offered all respects. You know, a lot of women, may struggle with that, but anyway, that's what Prabhupada says here, that the man's psychology and the woman's psychologies are different by bodily constitution. I mean, as you can tell just by looking at the body, a man always wants to be superior to his wife, and a woman, as in terms of her body, is naturally inferior to her husband. So thus the husband wants to be in the superior position, and the wife must allow him, must accept that. So Prabhupada this is all very interesting, extremely interesting for ladies. Even if the husband does something wrong, the wife should tolerate it, and then there'll be no misunderstanding between them. And then Prabhupada goes on to talk about Vishrambena, means with intimacy. It doesn't mean with familiarity, which breeds contempt, but actually For example, according to Vedic civilization, the wife doesn't call the husband by name. Thus, the inferiority and superiority complexes are recognized, yes, in Vedic terms. So, Dhammenacha, a wife has to learn to control herself, even if there's some misunderstanding. And Sohridena Vacha Madhuraya. Sohridena Vacha Madhuraya means always desiring good for the husband and speaking sweetly. Madhuraya, Vacha, Madhuraya. Speaking sweetly with him. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a person becomes agitated by so many material contacts in the outside world. Therefore, in his home life, he must be treated by his wife with sweet words. Okay, and on to verse 3. Working sanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity. So these then are some of the qualities of a great husband's great wife. Kardama was spiritually great. Anyway, a great husband is called Tejiyamsam, most powerful. He was spiritually great. Tejiyamsam. So even if the wife is equal to the husband spiritually, she must not be proud. Sometimes she shouldn't, sometimes it happens the wife comes from a rich family like Devahuti, and Kardama is just penniless. But the girl cannot be proud of that, like Devahuti. Anyway, it's being explained here. She was not proud. She was so submissive. So the wife must be submissive to the husband and not vain. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding with the family. And in this way, their married life is ruined if the wife becomes proud. So Devahuti was very careful about that. So it's stated here, she gave up pride completely, and she was certainly not unfaithful. To be unfaithful to the husband, Prabhupada says, the most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandit talks of 4 kinds of enemies at home. Listen to this. If the father's in debt, he's an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown-up children, that's interesting, isn't it? She's an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband, but deals very roughly, then she's an enemy. And if a son is a fool, he's also an enemy. So Srila Prabhupada says, in family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, that means even after the husband may have passed away, then according to Vedic civilization, she's considered an enemy. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. So verses 4 and 5 together. The daughter of Manu, who was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as greater even than Providence. Thus she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Emaciated means thin, very like skinny, like really skinny. Seeing her condition, Karadama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with love. Okay, so here we go. The purport, interesting purport. The wife is expected to be of the same category as the husband. She must follow the husband's principles. If the husband is a devotee, but the wife is materialistic, there cannot be peace at home. So what the wife must do, I mean, this is all very important for ladies. It may be very different from what's going on in day-to-day life, but we are not living in day-to-day life. We are trying to live in Krishna consciousness. So the wife must see the tendencies of the husband and follow him. Prabhupada gives the example of Gandhari. Her husband was blind, or even before they were married, the would-be husband was blind, Dhritarashtra. So she immediately began to practice blindness herself by covering her eyes. And she did that for a whole life, whole adult life. Yeah. So Prabhupada says the word samanuvrata indicates, well, let me just go back a sec. Gandhari, just to continue a little bit with Gandhari, as Prabhupada says, that she decided, her husband's blind, her eyesight is fine, but to follow her husband, she wore a cloth over her eyes, so playing the part of a blind woman. And Prabhupada says, she decided that since her husband was blind, she must also act like a blind woman. Otherwise, she would be proud of her eyes, and her husband would be seen as inferior. So then Prabhupada goes on to talk about the word samanuvrata. Samanuvrata indicates that the duty of a wife is to adopt the circumstances of the husband. That's one thing, if your husband's a great person like Karadama Muni, okay, then a very good result will come from following him. But even if the husband is not like him, not a great devotee, still she must adopt his mentality. Then married life will be happy. So Devahuti became very skinny, followed strict vows of chastity, became skinny, and Karadama became compassionate. Prabhupada concludes the purport and the section by saying she was reduced in health by such activities, and he became compassionate and addressed her as follows. All right, so on to the next section, from verse 6 to verse 8. And, the purports, well, there are purports, but we'll just go straight through here. We won't read through the verses first. We'll just go straight through verses and purports. Right, so Kardama appreciates Devahuti's service. Section 2, verse 6 to verse 8. Kardama appreciates Devahuti's service. Verse 6, Kardama Muni said, "O respectful daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, today I'm very much pleased with you for your great devotion and most excellent loving service. Since the body is so dear to embodied beings, I am astonished that you have neglected your own body to use it on my behalf." So there's a shortish purport here. So, first point, the body is very dear. Our bodies are very dear to us. But Devahuti was so faithful to Kardama and served him so faithfully, she didn't care for her health. She didn't care for her body. This is selfless service. So she didn't have any, well, Prabhupada says it appears she had no sense pleasure, even with her husband. Otherwise her health couldn't have deteriorated as it did. She simply facilitated him, not caring for bodily comfort. And Prabhupada makes the point, this is the duty of a faithful and chaste wife, particularly when the husband is Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in this case the husband also amply rewarded the wife. This is not to be expected by a woman who is the wife of an ordinary person. So you see, it does make a difference who or what the husband is. But if the husband's a devotee, even if he's not some great devotee, the wife must really try and accept him and serve him in these ways as much as she is capable. And how much is she capable? Well, that's an interesting question. Verse 7, Kardama Muni continued, I have achieved the blessings of the Lord in discharging my own religious life of austerity, meditation, and Krishna consciousness. Although you have not yet experienced these achievements, which are free from fear and lamentation, I shall offer them all to you, because you're engaged in my service. Now just look at them. I'm giving you the transcendental vision to see how nice they are. Wow. Okay, so we have a substantial purport here. First point, first paragraph, Devahuti, all she did was serve Kardama. So therefore you wouldn't expect she'd be so advanced in austerity or Krishna consciousness, austerity, ecstasy, meditation, Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada makes the point, what an important point. She was sharing in his advancement imperceptibly. How important is that? So therefore, automatically, she got these graces from the Lord. Second paragraph. So what are these graces of the Lord? That the first one, at the very least, is that one becomes abhaya, free from fearfulness. In the material world, if someone accumulates $1 million, He's always full of fear because he's thinking, what happens if I lose the money? Yeah. But the mercy of the Lord, Bhagavat Prasad, is never lost. It's simply to be enjoyed. No question of loss. One simply gains and enjoys gaining. So Prabhupada, Bhagavad Gita, says, when one gets the grace of the Lord, the result is sarva dukkani. All distresses are destroyed. When you're in the transcendental position, then you're freed from hankering and lamenting. And in devotional life, of course, you can achieve love of God. That's the highest perfection of Bhagavat Prasad, the grace of the Lord, divine mercy. So Prabhupada says, Prabodhananda Saraswati said, that if one achieves the grace of Lord Chaitanya, he becomes so great that he doesn't care a fig, even for the demigods. He thinks of monism as hellish, and for him the perfection of controlling the senses is as easy as anything. Heavenly pleasures become to him no more than stories. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, actually, there's no comparison between material happiness and transcendental happiness. Verse 3. So by the grace of Kardama, Devahuti got actual realization by serving. And Prabhupada says that there's another example, similar example we're all familiar with if we're studying Bhakti Vaibhava. Narada Muni, in his previous life, he was a maidservant's son, but he got the opportunity to serve the great devotees. And simply by eating their remnants and serving them, he became so elevated that in his next life, he became Narada Muni. And even in this life, he became very advanced devotee. So therefore, this is important. For spiritual achievement, the easiest path is to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and serve him with heart and soul. That is the secret of success. And that is pointed out, Prabhupada states, by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the Gauravastakam, 8th verse, Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada. By serving or receiving the grace of the spiritual master, one receives the grace of the Supreme Lord. Yes. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying that, just before he says this, he says, by serving her devotee husband, Devahuti shared in his achievements. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, similarly, a sincere disciple, simply by serving a bona fide spiritual master, can achieve all the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master simultaneously. All right, verse 8. Kardama Muni continued, what is the use of enjoyments other than the Lord's grace? All material achievements are subject to be annihilated simply by a movement of the eyebrows of Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By your principles of devotion to your husband, you have achieved and can enjoy transcendental gifts very rarely obtained by persons proud of aristocracy and material possessions. Right, so the purport, Lord Chaitanya said Prema Pramartha Mahan, the greatest achievement in life is love of God. That's what Kardama is recommending to Devahuti. She's from a very wealthy family, extremely, and generally those who are very materialistic and have got lots of wealth, etc., they can't appreciate the value of love of God. But Devahuti, under Kardama Muni's shelter, did, by his goodwill and satisfaction. Yes. So she served her husband, who was a great devotee. She served him with great sincerity, love, affection. Kardama was satisfied, and therefore he gave her love of God and recommended that she accept it and enjoy it, because he already had achieved it. Second paragraph, this love of God is not an ordinary commodity. Lord Chaitanya was worshipped by Rupa Goswami because he distributed it. Therefore, Rupa Goswami called him Mahavadanyaya, the most merciful personality. And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, Krishna Prema, Krishna consciousness, is the highest gift which can be bestowed on anyone whom we presume to love. If we love someone, it means we want the best for them. So if you want the best for someone, you must give them love of God, or give them access to it at least. Okay, so third paragraph, the word Nija Dharma Dohan, Srila Prabhupada says, is very significant. It means, from the word for word, gained by your own principles of devotion. So the thing is, Devahuti got this invaluable gift from her husband. Why? Because of her faithfulness. So faithfulness to the husband is the first principle for a woman. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if fortunately the husband is a great personality, then the combination is perfect, and the lives of both the wife and the husband are at once fulfilled. Right, so now we go on to the next section, which again, it's a short section. I'll just read straight through it. It's just 3 verses. Verse 9 to verse 11. 9, 10, and 11. It's the third section. Devahuti asks for a child. Okay, so verse 9. Upon hearing the speaking of the husband, who excelled in knowledge of all kinds of transcendental science, innocent Devahuti was very satisfied, her smiling face shining with a slightly bashful glance. She spoke in a choked voice because of great humility and love. It is said, if you're already Krishna conscious, doing devotional service, you've already completed austerity, penance, religion, sacrifice, mystic yoga, meditation. So Devahuti, Kardama, was so expert that there's nothing for him to argue about, Prabhupada says. That's interesting. And when she heard him speak, she was confident that since he was very advanced, he'd already surpassed all transcendental educational activities and stages. So she could tell he'd already done all this, completed everything, no doubt. So therefore, she knew that he was expert in giving gifts, and he was offering the greatest gift. So she was satisfied and so overwhelmed with love that she couldn't reply. So with faltering language, she spoke as follows, verse 10. Sri Devahuti said, "My dear husband, O best of Brahmins, I know that you have achieved perfection and are the master of all the infallible mystic powers, because you're under the protection of Yoga Maya, the transcendental nature. But you once made a promise that our bodily union should now fulfill, since children are a great quality for a chaste woman who has a glorious husband." Prabhupada says that Devahuti expressed her happiness by uttering the word bhata, which means, in the word for word, indeed, like definitely. She knew that definitely her husband was in a highly elevated transcendental position under the shelter of Yoga Maya. He wasn't under the material energy. He was under the internal potency. The Bhagavad Gita says that the advanced devotees, the Mahatmas, are like that. So, a symptom of being connected with the Lord and being under the spiritual energy, Yoga Maya, symptom is constant engagement in devotional service. So Devahuti knew this. She knew this. But, devotees, she knew that. She knew he was on the highest level, love of God. She knew he could give love of God. She knew all that, but still, she had a particular desire, which was mentioned in the previous session or last couple of sessions. She wanted to have a son, and he promised, so she reminded him. And she made the statement in the verse. It's very important. For a woman to have a child by a great person is most glorious. She becomes glorious through having a child by a great personality. So she prayed for that, and the word Stri, did she use the word Stri? Anyway, in general, the word Stri means one who expands. It's not actually in the verse. Stri means one who expands. Expansion. By the bodily union of the husband and wife, their qualities are expanded because children are born of good parents, and they're expansions of the parents' good qualifications. Yes. In this way, the qualifications of the parents expand. Stri. So they were both, Kardama, Devahuti, both of them, they were both enlightened. But she wanted first to become pregnant, then to get love of God. And Prabhupada makes the point, another interesting point, that for a woman, it is a great ambition to have a son of the same quality as a highly qualified husband. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since she had the opportunity to have Kardama Muni as her husband, she also desired to have a child by bodily union. So on to verse 11, Devahuti continued, my dear Lord, I am struck by excited emotion for you. Therefore kindly make what arrangements must be made according to the scriptures, so that my skinny body, emaciated through unsatisfied passion, may be rendered fit for you. Also, my Lord, please think of a suitable house for this purpose, because they're living more or less under the trees, or something like that. Okay, so now the purport. Vedic literatures are full of spiritual instructions, but also instructions for advancing in material life with a view to spiritual perfection. So therefore, Devahuti is asking Kardama, please, or how can I prepare myself for sex life according to the Vedic instructions? Because sex life is for having good children. So the circumstances for having good children are described in what is called Kama Shastra, K-A-M-A, Kama Shastra, talks of how to have sex life for nice children. So it talks about everything in that regard. What sort of house should be there for sex life for nice children? What sort of decoration should be there? What sort of dress the wife should have? How she should be decorated with ointment, scents, and other attractive features, etc. Then the husband will be attracted, and a favorable mental situation will be created. And then that mental situation of the husband will be transferred into the womb of the wife, and good children will come. There you go, devotees. That's interesting, isn't it? So here, of course, Devahuti explains that a body is skinny, and of course Kardama has noticed that, and she feared her body would not be attractive as a result for Kardama. So she wanted instruction how to improve her physical condition, so Kardama would be attracted to her sexually, and as a result, good children would come. So Prabhupada says, sex where the husband is attracted by the wife produces a male child, and sex based on the wife being attracted to the husband produces a female child. That's in Ayurveda, apparently. It's mentioned in Ayurveda. Right, so Devahuti wanted to increase the passion of Kardama Muni. Yes, so male children would come. Yes, by arrangements from Kama Shastra. And she wanted a proper house because Kardama's ashram was just too simple. In a place like that, there was less possibility of passion being aroused in his heart. Right, so now, devotees, we go on to the fourth section from verse 12 to verse 42. That's a long section. That's 30 verses or 31 verses. Okay, we'll read through all the verses first of all. The section we've titled, Kardama Produces an Aerial Mansion as a place for them to conceive children. Yeah, okay, so let's read through the verses and you'll see, gosh, what an interesting section this is. Verse 12, Maitreya continued, O Vidura, seeking to please his beloved wife, the sage Kardama exercised his yogic power and instantly produced an aerial mansion that could travel at his will. 13. It was a wonderful structure bedecked with all sorts of jewels, adorned with pillars of precious stones, and capable of yielding whatever one desired. It was equipped with every form of furniture and wealth, which tended to increase in the course of time. Verses 14 to 15. The castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. 16. The palace looked charming, with beds, couches, fans, and seats, all separately arranged in 7 stories. Wow, 7 levels. Shoo. 17. Its beauty was enhanced by artistic engravings here and there on the walls. The floor was of emerald with coral daisies. 18. The palace was very beautiful, with its coral thresholds at the entrances, and its doors bedecked with diamonds. Gold pinnacles crowned its domes of sapphire. 19. With the choicest rubies set in its diamond walls, it appeared as though possessed of eyes. It was furnished with wonderful canopies and greatly valuable gates of gold. 20. Here and there in that palace were multitudes of live swans and pigeons, as well as artificial swans and pigeons, so lifelike that the real swans rose above them again and again, thinking them live birds like themselves. Thus the palace vibrated with the sounds of these birds. 21. The castle had pleasure grounds, resting chambers, bedrooms, and inner and outer yards designed with an eye to comfort. All this caused astonishment to the sage himself. Even Kardama was astonished. 22. When he saw Devahuti looking at the gigantic opulent palace with a displeased heart, Kardama Muni could understand her feelings because he could study the heart of anyone. Thus he personally addressed his wife as follows. 23. My dear Devahuti, you look very much afraid. First bathe in Lake Bindu Sarova, created by Lord Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then mount this airplane. 24. The lotus-eyed Devahuti accepted the order of her husband. Because of her dirty dress and the locks of matted hair on her head, she did not look very attractive. 25. Her body was coated with a thick layer of dirt, and her breasts were discolored. She dove, however, into the lake, which contained the sacred waters of the Saraswati. 26. In a house inside the lake, she saw 1,000 girls, all in the prime of youth and fragrant like lotuses. 27. Seeing her, the damsels suddenly rose and said with folded hands, "We are your maidservants. Tell us what we can do for you." 28. The girls, being very respectful to Devahuti, brought her forth, and after bathing her with valuable oils and ointments, they gave her fine, new, spotless cloth to cover her body. 29. They then decorated her with very excellent and valuable jewels which shone brightly. Next they offered her food, containing all good qualities, and a sweet, inebriating drink called asavam. Verse 30. Then in a mirror she beheld her own reflection. Her body was completely freed from all dirt, and she was adorned with a garland, dressed in unsullied robes, and decorated with auspicious marks of tilak. She was served very respectfully by the maids. 31. Her entire body, including her head, was completely bathed, and she was decorated all over with ornaments. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrists and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. 32. About her hips she wore a girdle of gold, set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. 34. When she thought of her great husband, the best of sages, Kardama Muni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all her maidservants, at once appeared where he was. 35. She was amazed to find herself surrounded by 1,000 maids in the presence of her husband, and to witness his yogic power. 36 to 37. The sage could see that Devahuti had washed herself clean and was shining forth as though no longer his former wife. She had regained her own original beauty as the daughter of a prince. Dressed in excellent robes, her charming breasts duly girded, she was waited upon by 1,000 Gandharva girls. O destroyer of the enemy, his fondness for her grew, and he placed her on the aerial mansion. 38. Although seemingly attached to his beloved consort while served by the Gandharva girls, the sage did not lose his glory, which was mastery over his self. In the aerial mansion, Kardama Muni with his consort shone as charmingly as the moon in the midst of the stars in the sky, which causes rows of lilies to open in ponds at night. 39. In that aerial mansion, he traveled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru, which were rendered all the more beautiful by cool, gentle, fragrant breezes that stimulated passion. In these valleys, the treasurer of the gods, Kuvera, surrounded by beautiful women and praised by the siddhas, generally enjoys pleasure. Kardama Muni also, surrounded by the beautiful damsels and his wife, went there and enjoyed for many, many years. 40. Satisfied by his wife, he enjoyed in that aerial mansion, not only on Mount Meru, but in different gardens known as Vaishrambaka, Shurasana, Nandana, Pushpa Bhadraka, and Chaitra Rathya, and by the Manasa Sarovar lake. 41. He traveled in that way through the various planets, as the air passes uncontrolled in every direction. Coursing through the air in that great and splendid aerial mansion, which could fly at his will, He surpassed even the demigods. 42. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. So there you go, devotees. Those are the verses. Tomorrow we'll come back and we'll read the verses again with the purports. There's quite a number of short purports, a few longer ones, elaborating on this amazing, amazing scene. Okay, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.